this evening to the meeting of the Special Governance and Audit Committee. Before I start the meeting, I need to read out a few housekeeping matters. Firstly, can I please remind all participants that this meeting will be recorded and copy archived for future viewing. Could all participants mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, then can they please use the raise the hand function? When invited to speak by the chair, please could all participants ensure their microphones and cameras are on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this attention to the chair and/or Democratic Services officers as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not in the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and/or to grab the attention of the chair or Democratic Services officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let the chair or Democratic Services officer know. So into the agenda then. Firstly, apologies for absence. Yes, sorry, Karen.
If I can just mention, Chair, that I've been informed that Councillor Hooper may join us, but he may be late. But if he doesn't, and I also note that Mr. Ireland is not present as well. And again, if either of them let me know within the next 7 days, as you're aware, we have to do a decision notice and make that public. And obviously, members are allowed 7 days then to let us know if they've forgotten to give apologies. But Councillor Hooper's already given his apologies, but he may join, and I will let you know if he's joined, so you're aware. Thank you.
Yeah, it's unusual for Nigel not to give apologies, but there he may be other places. Thank you for that, Karen. Subject to that then, any declarations of interest? Item 2 of the agenda? No? Then we're on to item 3, which is the report of the Chief Executive, which is the audited statement of accounts 22-23. And I know Matt's going to take us through this with a presentation, but can I just remind members that we as an audit committee have already seen the draft statement of accounts, which Matt provided to us, I think, on the 17th of July. These have obviously now gone through the process with our colleagues in Audit Wales, and they've come back to us now clearly with a few recommendations, a few amendments, etc. But the key matter here is that we've got an unqualified statement of accounts. So unless there are any major issues that members wish to raise, we're not going to get back into the 22-23 accounts to reopen all that up. We've got a set of unqualified accounts. There are some issues which have been picked up, and clearly I'm sure Matt will tell you that it's highly likely that we will pick up a lessons learned paper from those recommendations, working with our colleagues in Audit Wales, and bring a report to Governance and Audit either at next month or in January, so that we can just ensure that we're on this continuous improvement agenda in regards to our accounts, and obviously members can then question that as we go forward. So over to you, Matt.
Evening, everyone. As the Chairman said, I've got a presentation to go through. It's mainly going to be myself talking, but there's some sections on the AGS that Andrew and Joan will take you through, and then later in the presentation on the ISA 260, Anthony Veal will go through that, and his colleague Julie Owens is also at the meeting as well. So let me just bring the presentation up. Right, can everybody see that? Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
Good. That's a good start. So we're basically going to cover these 7 or 8 bullet points and just take you through the progress, where we exactly are currently, headlines from the accounts, not too many changes from what was presented in draft actually, summary of the amendments, there've not been many of those, single management recommendation, some areas that we flagged up for further amendment. And I'll take those first parts of the presentation, then I'll hand over to Andrew and Joan will take you through the AGS, and then back to me to talk about the external audit assurances, and then to Anthony on the ISA 260, and then next steps. And I've pulled the presentation together in the much the same order, running order as the actual report in front of you this evening. So the good news is on this first slide. So the audit commenced start of July. It is now substantially, very comprehensively complete, and we've just mainly got a small pieces of evidence to provide to Anthony and team, and that's just some square footage for some properties and a trial balance from EBS, our Oracle Financial Ledger. The amendments to the accounts have been agreed and reviewed. The one piece of work outstanding is the joint committee audits, and they're covered in the report. They're all underway. We're expecting those to finish by the end of the month. The Big Fresh Catering Company audit is also drawing to a close, and the amended accounts have been received. Audit Wells, and Andrew might say a couple of words more on this later. They're keeping the developing RAC position under review. Quite clearly, the council's been undertaking inspection work, and at the moment all the priority one schools have been reviewed and are clear, and all of our social care establishments as well. So generally good news on that at the moment.
Matt, you're frozen.
Yeah, I think it's...
Lost me for a moment. I'm back.
Yeah, frozen.
Worrying, wasn't it? And then they'll be signed off by the Auditor General on the 7th of December. We sent an email round. As we're concluding our work between the two teams, there were a couple of small amendments during the course of the week, and those around the debtor provision of bad debts, bad and doubtful. There's a small amendment on deferred tax, that's just £17,000 actually. There was an amendment to the nature note to reflect the amended comprehensive income and expenditure statement. We've included a percentage for the pension deficit liability, so that's in addition to that note on page 79. And then we've also quite late on restated the group comprehensive income and expenditure statement in 2021-2, so the comparator year, to reflect the establishment of the new directorates from last year. So the key headlines, and some of these are pretty much unchanged from when we reported to you in July. So the movement and reserve statement does show a reduction in usable reserves of 13 million. That's slightly less than the reduction we reported in July, because we brought the City Deal joint committee reserve in, and I'll speak more about that in a moment. And also there's been an increase in school balances, just the minor one, because of the award of the dividend from Big Fresh Catering Company. Usual reserves have increased, and there's been an adjustment of 970k. Again, that's due to the City Deal accounts, and I'll pick up on that in a moment as well. The amended balance sheet, the key headlines of that are unchanged. Pension balances reflect the significant reduction associated with the triennial review. It was conducted at 31st of March 22, and obviously colleagues will remember in our pulling the budgets together for 23-4, that was well received, and that's seen a reduction in the employer contribution rates. And then PPE, so property and plant and equipment, that remains unchanged at £887 million. And as per July, that reflects our new build schemes in the HRA, Housing Revenue Account, and also in the general fund, notably schools in recent years. So moving on to the amendments, and we had a little bit of discussion about this in July, didn't we? When we pulled the accounts together, we pulled them together on the basis of the latest management accounts that we had from the City Deal team. We've now brought in their full accounts, and those are will be their financial accounts. So they'll have had the entries on usable, unusable reserves and so forth. So we've had to update our accounts for those relatively small sums of money. We represent just about, or the Vale does about 8.5% of the overall activity of the City Deal. So just a technical change there as we move from management accounting to financial accounting. The couple of changes as well on Big Fresh Catering Company. There've been a couple of amendments in their accounts that we've needed to update ours for. So we need to reflect a dividend of 304k, and that's had an impact on school balances, and it also affects the debtors balance by the same amount. The single entity debtors balance also includes an amendment of 260k, as we'd initially overclaimed a Welsh Government grant for free school meals, and that's been corrected. Group accounts consolidation has been amended to remove the dividend, as that's an intra-company transaction. And it's interesting to see, just with a small amendment here, how it washes right through the accounts. The amended group accounts have been consolidated to reflect the amendment for that grant owed and the amended tax position as a consequence.
You're frozen again, Matt.
Apologies for that. I'm not sure what's happening with Wi-Fi tonight. It's normally spot on. So the debtors note, we'd included provision for bad debts against the individual lines, and we needed to strip that out and show that separately. So that's on a single separate line now in the revised set of accounts. The overall number has changed as per the Big Fresh Catering Company update that I just provided. A similar set of changes on the creditors note. We just initially classified creditors on the gross pay account all against the general line, but we've needed to reallocate those out against sums owed to the HMRC, Teachers Pensions Agency, and the Cardiff and Vale pension funds. So a presentational change there. We've also a larger number here, but not impacting on the bottom line of the HRA. We'd incorrectly classified capital grants against the HRA instead of the general fund, and there's an adjustment of £6.9 million there. The overall capital grant sum's correct in the accounts, and this is just the notional apportionment that's been amended. The change does affect the split of the cost of services between general fund and HRA, the adjustments relating to general fund and HRA, and also the HRA statements, but it doesn't impact on the bottom line of the accounts. And the process around that allocation will be amended for 23/4 accounts process, and that's perhaps something we'll talk about when we do our lessons learned with you in the new year. There's also there was a late change when we were actually preparing the accounts back in July for the split between capital grants and capital receipts. And whilst the main statements and disclosures were amended, the capital financing requirement wasn't updated. So that's been done now. It doesn't then reflect the total figures within the note. The value of capital receipts was reduced by 540k, and the value of capital grants was increased by the same figure in that note. Within the capital adjustment account, we also had incorrectly shown £2.878 million as application of grants from capital grants and applied, and that's now been included within the main capital grants figure. So an item on the wrong line there. This is an issue familiar to you all as well, and we obviously had the upside of this when we were doing the management accounting reporting during last year. Did have quite a big impact on us. And obviously now we've got to actually get the accounting right for this as well. So we'd made an apportionment of that deferred social debt income between short and long-term debtors. During the course of the audit, we've reviewed our approach to that. Our general view is that the majority of that debt is likely to be long-term, and will only reflect it as short-term when we're actually in the process of recovering the charge against the property. And again, we're reviewing how we're doing that going forward. Just one management recommendation, and we've agreed that with Audit Wales, and that's around our senior management declarations of interest. We've pretty much done that on an exception basis, but what we're going to have to do is have an annual process where we actually ask the senior management team, so SLT, senior leadership team, to actually provide assurance on a non-exception basis on an annual basis. There's a couple of areas for potential further amendment, and there's always risk of that whilst the accounts remain open. Within this period though, and it's a short period before we get to council and have the sign off from the Auditor General as well, it's the emerging picture in respect of RAC. So whilst we've had positive news at the moment, we can't say for 100% certainty that won't change. The survey work is ongoing, and what we have been doing is providing Audit Wales with regular updates, and continue to do that. I think in the event that there was an issue around it, we have discussed how we would deal with that, and the likelihood is there'd be a disclosure in the form of a contingent liability. It would be very unlikely that we'd know the full value of the remedial works that we would need to do. So there'd be some uncertainty about numbers in respect to that. But hopefully that isn't something we're going to have to do in any case. So I'm now going to hand over to Andrew or Joan, and I'll keep the slide deck going and just hold it up whilst you take us through this, please. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Chair. So the annual governance statement is a requirement for it to sit alongside the statement of accounts, and the internal audit team collate it on behalf of the whole organisation. And its intention is to assess the corporate governance arrangements across the whole of the council. So the internal audit team do contribute to it, but not wholly, and take on board information and data provided by other services across the organisation as well. So where we are at the moment is that there are no significant changes from the draft that was presented in July's pack to committee. We have taken on board the comments of committee at the time, and also the notes that were sent through from some members to include in the current AGS, which is in the pack before you tonight. It's been reviewed by Audit Wales, and basically a clean bill of health generally. There was one minor comment in respect of the whistleblowing policy, and the AGS in the pack has been updated to reflect that within the final version. From an internal audit perspective, we contribute in terms of the opinions we issue throughout the year, accumulating in my annual report, which is the opportunity to give an overall opinion on the adequacy of the internal control environment, governance arrangements and risk management processes in place. And for 22-23, I issued a reasonable assurance. Overall, there are demonstrable governance arrangements in place across the organisation to meet the principles as set out in the SIP for Solace framework, which is the guidance we use to demonstrate our effectiveness. And a review has been undertaken to assess that effectiveness. Where areas have been identified to further improve our governance arrangements across the board, such as workforce, financial pressures and resilience, expectations and demands for services, further actions have already been identified, and they'll be taken on board moving forward into 23-24. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Andrew. Right. Just as a place marker, this one really, on the external audit assurances, the full letters in the pack that we've received from Audit Wales earlier in the year, we've responded to that, and that's been done through sharing that letter with senior finance colleagues and audit and the legal department, and they've come back with those assurances, and I've run those past Audit Wales as well. And just to cover off one of the points that we had from last year about the various levels of protection, the basic controls are in place, and we have those in place through our constitution and the other corporate policy documents. So I'm now going to hand over to Anthony.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Chair. Just to introduce myself, my name is Anthony Veal. I'm the Audit Director from Audit Wales. So it's a pleasure to be with you this evening. Hopefully you'll have seen, committee members will have seen our financial statements report that's in the pack. Matt's referred to it quite rightly as the ISA 260 report, which is commonly known as, which refers to the auditing standard, which requires us to report the findings of our audit to the Governance and Audit Committee, and of course then to Council on the 4th of December. Just picking up what the Chair said right at the start of the meeting, this is the key bullet line is that we do, all things being equal, we intend to issue an unqualified audit report on your 22-23 financial statements. So that's exactly where we are at the minute. Before we do that, when the accounts are signed by Council on the 4th, we will need to have a signed letter of representation alongside those signed accounts. There is a letter of representation in the ISA 260 report. It's in Appendix 1. And for those of you who are not familiar with a letter of rep, that's ultimately this is basically a standard audit procedure that happens across the accounts and auditing world. And it's effectively confirmation from management that they've met their responsibilities for completing the financial statements. They've given us access, management have given us access to all the information that we need. And of course, everything that should have been disclosed has been disclosed within the financial statements. So it's making sure all liabilities or fraud, any issues or references to fraud has been included within the financial statements. So once we do that, we'll then pick up the accounts and we'll take them to the Auditor General, who's all set up and scheduled to sign the financial statements or his audit opinion on the 7th of December. The audit opinion covers the council and indeed the group, because obviously there's a consolidation with BFCC. And of course, what the opinion will say is that we'll give a true and fair view on the financial position of the council at the 31st of March 23, and of course its income and expenditure as well. And we also say that the accounts have been prepared in accordance with appropriate legislation and applicable accounting standards as well. So that's the basic messages within our audit opinion. Our report comments on the fact that no significant issues arose during the audit. Yes, there were issues that arose, but nothing that we would classify as significant. Audit amendments, misstatements, call them what you will, that we raise as part of the audit process, all of them have been corrected. So there are nothing outstanding that hasn't been corrected. So management has taken everything on board and has corrected everything. The corrected misstatements are again shown in Appendix 3 to our report, and they will marry back to what Matt has gone through as part of his presentation. And then finally, we refer to our one solitary recommendation, which is in Appendix 4, which again, Matt has referred to on a previous slide, covering the issue about declarations of interest for senior officers as well. So that's covered in the main part of this presentation. So again, I'm happy to take any questions after the presentations regarding our report, but that's really a whistle-stop summary of the key points.
Thank you. So last slide, you'll be glad to hear. As I've already mentioned, actually, they'll be reported to council on the 4th of December, and they'll include, as well as the updated statement of accounts and AGS, they'll have that letter of representation that Anthony's just taken us through. It's scheduled for sign off with the Auditor General 7th of December. The Joint Committee accounts, once audited, and I mentioned those at the outset, they'll be reported to their respective joint committees. However, we will ensure that the ISAs are brought here to governance and audit. And then also we'll do similar for information purposes again with the City Deal accounts. Once we're finalised, we'll provide the committee with an update on those as well. So thank you. That's all from us in terms of the presentation. I'll stop sharing at that point and take any questions.
Chair, before we commence, can I just mention that Councillor Hooper and Mr Ireland, if you haven't seen, for the benefit of those viewing at home and the members were on the call, have joined during the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Karen. I did observe Councillor Hooper on the top of my screen and Nigel on the side. So, yeah, no problem. Well, thank you for that, Matt, and Andrew, and you, Anthony, for taking through us that very comprehensive presentation. And I think, as we've said previously, the primary issues really are contained in Appendix 3 of the Auditor General's report in regards to those matters which were found wanting, but they weren't substantive, and they have been amended, as Anthony have said. So that's the first key issue. Second one is the recommendation, and again, that seems to be fairly straightforward. I only have one question on the recommendation, is about the how do you define senior management? Is it statutorily defined, or is it a matter for the local authority to define? That's the only question I've got there. But in reality, I think we'll open it up for questions to members. But as I said, you know, we're at the final stages now. We've got an unqualified statement of accounts, subject hopefully to nothing else coming forward. And subject to us signing them off, then clearly they can go to council on the 4th of December. With a fair wind, it'll go to the Auditor General on the 7th of August. So just open it up to any members. Councillor Hooper, I was waiting.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate that. And thanks, Matt. And this relates to the very last point on your slides, Matt, and it relates to the City Deal accounts. And it looks like we're being treated as we're just a recipient of their work, where we're supposed to be people who can actually consider the work they're doing. And we asked at a previous Governance and Audit Committee that the City Deal come and actually talk us through their accounts, because one of the reasons they're late is there's some complications, I understand, in their accounts provision. And I think we really should be treated with a bit more respect with this, and we'd expect them to come here and not just be a recipient of their statement. So we've said it before, I think we had a unanimity on that from this committee. So I'd repeat the request that City Deal Finance come here and talk us through their accounts. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hooper. Matt, I'm sure you can pick it up and make a formal request now from the committee that they attend in the, I suggest, in the new year. You know, if we're picking up issues of lessons learned, that we ask them to come to the same committee really, and then take us through their accounts, and maybe that we invite the director, Kelly Byrne, as well along, which may be of use as well for members to question.
Yeah, I'll make that one.
Lovely, thanks. I don't know whether there is a request. I think I should imagine we could actually formally, demand that they come, given they're the accounts of, we're a contributor to the City Deal. So we'll wait and see. Let's play it nicely at the moment. Anthony.
I was just going to say, Chair, on that point, because it is indeed a joint committee, you'll have right of passage in through that. You are a member of the joint committee. I'm not personally involved in the audit of that. But ultimately, I think they've only just prepared their accounts. I know we've only had the corrections going through the Vales accounts. I think probably September, October, so that they haven't long been produced. But and they are indeed a complicated set of accounts. I'm not sure what the technical issues that you were referring to, Councillor Hooper, but I'm sure they'll be able to shed some light on that.
Councillor Hooper, do you want to just
just to respond? Two things. Firstly, we made this polite request at this meeting previously, and we asked. So I do wonder whether or not we need to make it more formal. And relating to Anthony's point, that's what we've been told, is they're complicated. And one of the things I think we've got to recognise is the city deal can't be an opaque system for committees like ourselves, but more importantly to our constituents. They need to realise what's going on, and the less we share this, the more concerned people will be, rightly so. So I think this is I think we should formalise the request, Chair, rather than have it as because we have made the point previously. So, I don't know whether it's got lost in translation, and if it has, let's make it clear that we would like that. And if they refuse, then that's a matter we can deal with in a different way.
Sorry, Matt.
Yeah, it's not a case that it's the request of the committee's been lost. I think it's bringing them along at the right time. And I think the right time is once the accounts, the audit of their accounts has been completed. I don't think there'd be much value in them bringing some draft ones and then subsequently they change. So let's have them along once their accounts have been signed off.
Okay, are there any other questions? No, Anthony, is there a definition for senior management?
In a nutshell, no. It's up to the authority to determine. Okay. But ultimately, just for reference, Chair, senior officers will be those disclosed in your senior officer remuneration note. It's normally those decision makers, the key decision makers within any body. So it's not tightly defined. That's the framework. But if you want to see who's captured, it'll be those from the remuneration note within the financial statements. I hope that helps.
Thank you for that clarity, Anthony. That's very welcomed. Matthew? Matthew, you're mute. No.
Can you hear me at all?
That's better. That's better.
There we go. Right. There we go. Leave it. Gremlins out the way. Well, I'll start again. No issues really on the accounts from my planet. Maybe it's just on the understanding point for me, Matt. I guess given the time where we expected to submit accounts and now, do we have any obligations to consider anything that we find out in the interim that's happened, whether it affects this period or prior period, and has anything like that happened in materiality and that kind of thing? I guess you have this weird period that I guess so yeah,
that will have been picked up generally during the audit, and that little gap between this evening and council I will pick up in the letter of representation, but as of this moment there is nothing to go in there.
Okay, I was thinking more, I guess, between the time we were probably expected in the year to submit our accounts, and given these a late submission of the accounts, that kind of period that we wouldn't normally expect if we followed the calendar works perfect.
I'll let Anthony come in now, but I think one of the things I was going to comment on this when I was introducing the accounts, actually, obviously with the 21-2 accounts, it was well into the new year. that we eventually had them signed off, and that was for good reason. But that period, by the end of the financial year and the point at which we had them signed off, was quite lengthy. We are now this really good direction of travel, and we're getting back on track and being more in line with the statutory deadlines for closing our accounts. They do revert to the pre-COVID deadlines for having draft accounts by the 31st of May and audit accounts by the end of July. And if people would cast their minds back to COVID, a lot of local authorities really struggle to hit those deadlines in any case. But our understanding is, whilst the regulations would have us revert to those timescales, there are discussions ongoing that would probably give us to the 30th of June for draft accounts, and Anthony and team to have them audited by the end of September. So we're in a relatively good place. We're getting back on track with the timings, and certainly I've seen during this audit the two teams working really well together, and that's certainly been supported by Audit Wales coming in and joining us in the office on a couple of occasions as well.
If I could come in there, Chair, I think that, as Matt said, the direction of travel is that, and again, this will depend on legislation being passed, is for the eventual position for the accounts to be prepared by the end of June and the audit to be completed by the end of September. I think, just to put the Vale into context, it did complete its accounts by the end of June. Not all local authorities were able to do that for good reasons. And there are still some authorities where we've not received accounts just yet as well. So just to put that into context, I think if you revert back to England, I think, they're still waiting to complete accounts going back as far as 1920. So public sector audit is having some, and practitioners and local authorities are having some difficulties. But I think, as Matt said, we're on the right track in Wales, because we ourselves have had some workforce problems in terms of recruitment and retention, which has made it even more difficult as well. But just to go back to your initial question, Matthew, if I may, I think you're referring to the post-balance sheet event period. Almost, it actually starts from the 1st of April after the accounts are closed, and that remains open until we sign off the accounts on the 7th of December. So we'll be continually doing sort of post-balance sheet event reviews by reviews of minutes, etc., to see if anything that's happened of significance that could impact back on the 22-23 financial year. And I think Matt's referring to, if RAC was discovered now, whilst it would take a long time to understand the remedial amounts involved, but that's something that could impact, something that does come out of the blue, that can hit authorities and can impact on their financial statements. So it's a good point you make, but we would have that covered, and we'll be referring to that in our letter of rep as well.
Thank you for that, Anthony, for that clarification. Councillor Hooper?
Thanks, Chair. And this is just relating to the process question that we just had brought up. When Gemma came to this committee, I think it was towards the very end of last year's accounts, I asked a question as to whether or not, what are the issues that are stopping us from hitting our deadlines even for this year? So I think one of the concerns I had was working from home, one of those things that was tricky. And she did say that it still caused some problems. It's better when people are able to be able to talk about. I'm just wondering, Matt, if you could just shed some light as to, is that still a concern? I appreciate, Chair, this isn't a direct question on these accounts, but as process had been brought up, I thought it'd be useful to get Matt's views. Thanks.
I think it's less of a concern than it was. I think one of the big considerations last year with the 21-2 accounts was some quite significant changes in the finance team. So the long-standing Section 151 officer had left in the December. The deputy had covered for a period of time, but then retired. Then I've joined, and Gemma's been promoted, so she was relatively new in post as well. She is extremely competent and such a valuable member of the team. I'm quite staggered how much she gets through, to be honest. So the team's in a lot more stable position. We did hit the 30th of June deadline, so I think we're in good shape. But it has helped those couple of days when we've had the Audit Wales team in the office as well. But relationships there are really good, and when those relationships are good, people can operate remotely as well as face to face.
Thank you for that, Matt. Are there any other questions? There's no one showing. If there are no other questions, are there any comments? No, I only pick up a little comment, maybe very flippantly, to Anthony. It's pleasing to hear that some authorities are still dealing with their 1920 accounts. I assume that's 2019, 2020, but you never know, eh? You never know what's happening in England. Maybe they're a bit slower than us in Wales. I don't know. Are there any other comments? No, if we go to the recommendations, then you'll see the recommendations on page 3 of the report. The recommendations are set out there in paragraphs 1 to 5. If someone's prepared to move, please. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Nigel. Anyone against? No, that's carried unanimously. So thank you all very much for that. That concludes the item. Can I say before everyone leaves, can I just thank Matt and his team? And I think Councillor Hooper picked it up, a very small team doing a very important and difficult job in the council, and to get us to where we are and hit the deadline of June. I think they need to be congratulated for that. I think we also need to congratulate and thank Andrew and his team as well for dealing with the annual governance statement, and certainly Audit Wales. It's great to hear that your team's working very closely with the team in the Vale of Glamorgan. It's great that it's been dealt with effectively and efficiently. Not part, obviously, of the formal meeting, but I always ask that, given they've been dealt with so quickly, I'm sure the Auditor General will give us a rebate on our fee. So we look forward to receiving the cheque in due course. Dare I say that tongue in cheek, but there we are. But thank you, Anthony, and your team. If you could thank your team, it's very much appreciated. I know you got your hand up. I don't know whether you wish to say something.
I was only going to say, I should have done this when I spoke earlier, Chair. I should have thanked Matt and his team as well, because the cooperation we get is second to none. It's a really tricky job getting those accounts done. It's easy to forget. It's £500 million going through the accounts. It's quite complex. We certainly do appreciate it, and like I said, it works well, and that helps. So big thanks from us as well.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony, and we look forward to you attending the next meeting and handing the rebate cheque to Rob and Matt. I'll be very grateful. Can I also thank the members for their contribution this evening, and obviously for their support in dealing with this obviously annual matter, but clearly the Vale onwards and upwards still in regards to the improvement of the accounts, not necessarily in the financial arrangements. We'll see what happens next year. But just thank everyone for attending this evening, and good night. And most people are at home, so I can't say have a safe journey home, but thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Good night.